Today's program is brought to you by sunsetlakecbd.com. It is our place here. I think it's safe for me to say it. I don't like to speak for other people, but it is our all of our favorite and really go-to source for CBD. sunsetlakecbd.com. These folks started out as a dairy farm that has been providing and still provides dairy for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They decided to diversify a couple years back. They started with regenerative farming practices that they developed with the University of Vermont. Their CBD is 100% pesticide-free. They use integrated pest management to deal with their pests. Their fertilizer, 100% organic, and their products are awesome. They have CBD gummies, CBDs. They have fudge infused CBD, or I should say CBD infused fudge, which is going to be I'm going to be hitting hard over the next week as I will be on vacation. They have CBD infused coffee, and then tincture, which is a big help for my problems with sleeping. They have a arnica and CBD salve that I use for a little bit for muscle aches, but mostly I use it just for like skin situations. And they have smokables. Matt, who was a CBD skeptic, particularly after he came back from California a couple of years ago. For a long time, he was talking about how he had a bad experience out there. Sunset Lake CBD sent him some smalls, and now he's a believer.
Yeah, both the smalls and the keef. You put that right in your grinder, mix it in. It's great. Great, nice little CBD kick.
You moved to the keef as well. I've had some of the pre-rolls. CBD is an interesting experience because it doesn't have the psychoactive part of cannabis, but it has the sort of like physical relaxation. It's a great company. They have great business practices, $15 minimum wage. They a mostly employee-owned company, and they are fans of the show, and they are giving you 20% off your purchase with the coupon code LEFTISBEST. One word, LEFTISBEST, at sunsetlakecbd.com. Check out their CBD stuff. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. sunsetlakecbd.com. LEFTISBEST, 20% off. Let's start the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, March 26, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, New Republic staff writer, host of The Politics of Everything, Alex Pareene will be joining us. And then later, writer, Twitterer, Carl Beijer will be joining us to examine, in some sorts, I guess, my political ideology. Meanwhile, in Georgia, Republicans pass an anti-voting law which gives the Republicans structural ability to overturn election results in that state, among other things. Speaking of voting, Dominion Voting Systems is suing Fox News for $1.6 billion. New documents show that Amazon is, in fact, contrary to the Amazon News protestations, is in fact aware that its drivers are sometimes forced to pee in bottles. Joe Biden's first press conference, a massive fail for the media. Speaking of fail, Brazil hits a record for 100,000 coronavirus cases in a day. And in this country, coronavirus infections rising in 19 states. 30 states, meanwhile, face what is being described as a tidal wave of water shutoffs as state shutoff bans end. In Arkansas, the governor signs an anti-trans sports ban into law. A new report claims the U.S. military has been clandestinely burning toxic chemicals over the past 4 or 5 years in low-income neighborhoods. Lastly, Joe Biden looks to keep Trump's armed drone sales boosting policy. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Emma, how are you today?
I am well today. Happy Friday.
Yes, I'm very excited.
And it's nice out today, so we've got 60-plus degree weather here in New York.
It is, spring has definitely sprung, without a doubt.
And by the way, also the Knicks came back and won last night, and the Rangers won 8-3 against the Flyers.
That's why Emma's in a good mood today.
A little bit of a double
That's why
feature
Emma's
for
in a
me
good
last
mood
night.
today.
Yeah.
Her sports teams have proven victorious.
It was big wins on both ends. That's all I got to say about that.
That's you're being very reserved. That's that's impressive. Meanwhile, in Georgia, following in the wake of really, in many ways, very surprising, at least to the outside world, wins by Democrats in Georgia in this last election cycle. The Republicans, who, remember, there are prosecutors in Georgia who are investigating Donald Trump's attempt to overturn the election. They realized, apparently, that attempting to overturn an election based upon the laws that existed as of 2 days ago was illegal. So they have changed the laws where they have essentially stripped the power of overseeing elections and given it to from elected representatives whose job it is to oversee elections, and given it to the Republican legislature. In other words, they were upset that Raffensperger, in many respects, did not act like Kemp did in his election against Stacey Abrams, which was he was the Secretary of State. He shut down a lot of polling places while he was also running as governor. And as you recall, Donald Trump asked Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, to keep counting and, overturn the election results in various counties in Georgia. And now what they've done is they have stripped whoever is functioning as Raffensperger. At this point, it's Raffensperger, but the Secretary of State.
Raffensperger, you said it 3 times, so I had to correct you.
Of course, I'm mispronouncing it.
Yes.
And now the state legislature can do this. This is on top of other voting restrictions that they have imposed, including making it criminal to provide water for people who are waiting in long lines. But here is waiting in long lines to vote. Here's Brian Kemp. And one wonders if he brought this up because he's dealing with the criticism, or if he thinks that there's value in him projecting this image of Jim Crow.
According to them, if you support voter ID for absentee ballots, you're a racist. According to them, if you believe in protecting the security and sanctity of the ballot box, you're a, quote, Jim Crow in a suit and tie, end quote. I've fought these partisan activists tooth and nail for over 10 years to keep our elections secure, accessible, and fair. Like before, I'm sure they will threaten, boycott, sue, demonize, and team up with their friends in the national media to call me everything in the book.
I think to a certain extent, part of this might be an attempt to sort of divert where the real power in this legislation is. It is, the more obvious stuff is the voter suppression. That is it depends on which studies you look at. Sometimes that can backfire, particularly in terms of who they're trying to suppress. But if you gain control over overturning the results and make that a function of the state legislature, as opposed to a would-be professional's office, it really doesn't matter whether your vote suppression tactics work or not, because you can turn around and change the results.
It calls into question what he means by, they're ostensibly trying to protect the security of the ballot box and the beauty of our elections by making it so that elected representatives are the ones who are responsible for stacking the committee that would be overseeing the elections. Like, you just don't have to look too far into it to see how backwards and purposely so this is.
Yeah, exactly. And we will talk more about this with Alex Pareene in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with said Alex Pareene from the New Republic. Folks, today's show also sponsored by Freshly. Dinner time can be hectic and chaotic and difficult. Freshly's chefs take care of your meals a few nights a week, and what it does is it takes the pressure off of you. I've told this story many times now, but this is one of my best. This is one of the best, I think, sort of advertiser stories that we have.
Yeah.
My mom getting up there, my sisters and I wanted to make sure that she was eating properly, and so we decided to send her some meals that she could just heat up and eat, and we wanted them to be quality and delicious, and we wanted them to like them. But my mom would have never allowed us to do that, except for we told her, hey, this company called Freshly is advertising on Sam's show, and they've given him basically a lifetime of free meals, which incidentally does not happen. And she said, oh, okay, well, I'll try it. And she loved them. She loved them. She kept to the point where it started to get a little bit awkward, because almost every, conversation I have with my mom, the first thing she says is thank you again for the meals, which, we were sending them to her, but she's like, and I've told all my friends to get it as well. And I'm so happy that they're advertising in her show. Well, yeah. They weren't advertising, but then just lo and behold, they came, they asked if they could advertise. And I was like, absolutely. Because Freshly offers chef-made, nutrient-packed, delicious meals. They deliver them directly to your door or to your mom's door. No cooking required. With Freshly, your meals arrive cooked and fresh every week. You can keep your fridge stocked, skip the trip to the store. Ordering is super easy. You go to freshly.com. You choose from over 30 meals, like my mom's favorite, steak peppercorn. Or you can get sausage baked penne. You get the chicken pesto bowl. They have all sorts of delicious meals. Freshly can fit your lifestyle with a variety of plans and meals to pick from that works for your needs. And now our listeners can try Freshly for just $6.16 per meal. Your meals are ready to heat and enjoy in 3 minutes. Right now, Freshly's offering our listeners $40 off your first 2 orders when you go to freshly.com/majority. Stop stressing about dinner. Go to freshly.com/majority for $40 off your first 2 orders. That's freshly.com/majority for $40 off your first 2 orders. Can't tell you enough how happy we've been with Freshly. My mom still continues to have 3 or 4 Freshly meals a week. Meanwhile, again, I don't even have to. I just said this to Emma beforehand. I said, "Oh, your favorite ad is on there today."
I was waiting for it.
2021, new year, new rear. Don't just make a commitment in 2021 to wash your hands every time you go. Go the extra mile and wash your butt. That's right. The brand new Hello Tushy 3.0 modern bidet attachment. It's finally here. It's stylish. It's eco-friendly. Super easy to install and very affordable. Hello Tushy 3.0 doesn't just cleanse your butt with a precise stream of fresh water. It cleans itself, both before and after it's used, with the Smart Spray automatic self-cleaning nozzle. It attaches to your existing toilet, requires no electricity, no additional plumbing, and cuts your toilet paper in use by 80%. Sanitation is simple. The Schmutz Shield offers easy cleaning. The knobs are naturally antimicrobial. Plus, every Hello Tushy bidet attachment comes with a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. If you already have the Hello Tushy, like I did, I think I had the 2.0, but I'm not sure that's what they called it. You can now upgrade to the 3.0. It is super easy to install this thing. Like I said, no new plumbing, no electricity. You pop off your toilet seat, you pop it down, screw it into your existing plumbing. It's super easy, folks. And it is a great way to finally try what everybody who has ever had a bidet has told you, that it is really like, it is the idea of the way that we go to the bathroom, that we clean ourselves in the bathroom is, it's like, it's sort of shocking when you think about the technology has not improved, but it has, and it's called a bidet, folks. Go to hellotushy.com/majority. Get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for our listeners. Go to hellotushy, TUSHY.com/majority for 10% off. hellotushy.com/majority. All right, want to welcome back to the program Alex Pareene. He is staff writer at The New Republic. He is the host, or co-host, I should say, of The Politics of Everything. And as you can see, he is a Twins fan.
That's right.
Pareene, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Sam.
So, Alex, let's touch on at least what's going on in Georgia, because obviously this has national implications in a couple of different ways, not the least of which is the reason why the Democrats control the Senate right now is, in many respects, the reason why we're seeing the Georgian Republicans do this. It's not unique to Georgia. We're seeing this around the country, though. But just give me your sense of how this, what the implications of this may be on a national level, and obviously to the extent that we can get a sense of it in Georgia.
I think it's hard to say what the implications are on a national level so far, because I think it'll depend on what Democrats do in response, right? Like, they have this voting rights bill that passed the House. And it really just depends now on, are they actually going to make it a priority or not? And because I think if they don't, and I feel like I've heard people be pretty optimistic about it, but I find it, I find the pace of what the Senate's been doing so far to be pretty slow. But if they don't, it's really, it's a green light that you can get away with this. And I think Republicans in Michigan are doing something similar. And I mean, across the country, wherever they hold state houses, they're going to try stuff like this. And like, weirdly, like, I think that they don't even quite know, the Republicans doing this don't even quite know what the direct implications of all these measures are, like voter repression. There are sort of tried and true ways of suppressing the Democratic vote that this goes beyond. These measures go beyond that in a way that, like, who knows what the implications will be.
Well, that's what's interesting about it. I mean, there's two sets of things that this Georgia bill does. it does the sort of like juiced up voter suppression tactics that in many respects, just on their face, just in terms of their direct impact, may end up hurting their voters as much as Democratic voters in Georgia because of the way that they've targeted, like, no excuse absentee voting. The Republicans up until COVID used that more. Mm-hmm. So it's not clear how that reverts back. But then there's also a decent amount of studies out there that, like, when you have something this egregious, it backfires because it ends up making it a story about how the Republicans are trying to prohibit people from voting, particularly, African-American communities and people of color in general. But the measures where they're taking away the authority and sort of like highly politicizing the jobs of assessing the outcomes of elections, that to me seems really problematic. And in some respects, it seems to me that like Kemp understands when he was making this announcement, we played a clip of him saying like, they're calling me Jim Crow. They're saying I'm racist. They want to play on that territory, right? Because that gets their base out. They don't want to talk about the sort of more structural things that they have changed in the way that they assess the validity of an election. And that, to me, is the scarier part. And that's really just a function of the fact that the Supreme Court has, in many respects, eviscerated the Voting Rights Act. And there's no way to put any check on them doing something like that.
Yeah. And that's I think you're completely right. Because there's one funny part of it where it's like, I think Republicans in Florida were moving to limit absentee voting just because like absentee voting became a Democratic thing last year. But Florida elections, the people who vote in Florida elections have been using a lot of absentee voting to vote for Republicans for many years. So you can almost like look at that part of it and kind of be like, all right, like they don't really quite know what they're doing. But I think that, when people were sort of trying to raise alarm bells about what Trump was doing after the November election, it was almost less that like he's going to succeed and more that like he's just laying the groundwork he's making it okay for Republicans to try all these things that are very dangerous, like saying like, we're gonna change who gets to decide what the final result of an election is. Like we're gonna politicize like counting the votes, and we're gonna politicize recording the vote tallies and stuff like that.
And while Republicans are doing this on the state level, as they made gains in state legislatures, I mean, the Democrats did not flip one state legislature, am I right, in this past election cycle? The Democratic Party is having a fight about the filibuster when it comes to these voting rights. And so this seems like a classic, even though the Democratic Party seems to have learned a lot of lessons over more than I thought they might have over the past, what they've demonstrated over the past few months. This seems like classic Democratic Party where they're going to get caught up in procedure, as on the state level, Republicans are making massive changes that could have dire implications for decades to come.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that because, Alex, you say that you're concerned about the slow pace in the Senate. I will also, what needs to be said right now is that I don't know how many months ago it was, but the earliest piece I saw that had any notion of the theme of "Don't worry about Joe Manchin" was yours. I can't remember. Yeah. But you wrote it very early, maybe even before the inauguration. And I raised that because, yesterday we were talking about President Joe Manchin. And this, there's a dynamic, and people have started to catch on to this in a couple of different places. 2 weeks ago, on March 8th, rather, not 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, close to, in Axios. I'll read a couple. Joe Manchin has said he'll block Biden's next big package, $2 trillion to $4 trillion for climate and infrastructure, if Republicans aren't included. Manchin said the infrastructure bill can be big, as much as $4 trillion, as long as it's paid for with tax increases. He said he'll start his bargaining by requiring the package be 100% paid for. Mm-hmm. Now, on March 24th, 2 days ago, he says... this was in, I think this was in I'm not sure if this was in the Washington Post or it could have been Axios. Senator Joe Manchin said Wednesday he favors large infrastructure package that would be paid for in part, which is different from 100%, by raising tax revenues. Point of contention between the two parties. Quote, I'm sure of one thing, it's going to be enormous. Said the West Virginia Democrat, who's seen as a swing vote in the chamber. Notably, Manchin said the Republicans' resistance to higher taxes was not a reasonable position if they want the package to be paid for. And yeah, I mean, you called it with Manchin, and well, give me your sense of where we're headed, because I'm starting to see stuff like stories about Joe Biden meeting with historians and coming out going $5 trillion.
Yeah, I don't know. That Manchin stuff is so funny. The tax thing was like, it's like such a, and I gotta give him more credit than I used to for the way he's able to play this with the media, because he can get them to write it just the way he wants them to write it. Joe Manchin is saying, we got to do a huge infrastructure bill, and you know what? We're going to raise taxes on rich people. I don't care what my colleagues in the Democratic Party say. I demand we raise taxes on rich people to fund infrastructure. And you're like, oh no, anything but that, Joe, please. But so that's, my impression is that I don't know. I'm probably more hopeful now about, we're talking about the Voting Rights Act, or the sort of voting rights bill, the For the People Act. Biden made it clear that his next move is infrastructure. Biden made it clear that like he wants to do things sort of in some particular order, one at a time. I think they need to make sure that they don't run out of time for that, because it's an existential issue for the Democratic Party. It's like, and I think some of them know it, but they all got to be really clear that it's an existential issue for like the ability of this party to win elections going forward.
Do you have any sense of what the timing is? I mean, the infrastructure bill is going to be more than likely a reconciliation bill, right? I mean, unless I guess they deal with the filibuster before then, but there's no reason not to make it a reconciliation bill. It seems to me, and they have two bites at this. I'm not exactly sure. I think we must be, starting probably in a week. We're in fiscal year 2021, or we're still we're in fiscal year 2021. So that's when they get another opportunity for reconciliation. But what do you think that what's going on in Georgia might end up being the impetus to accelerate S1, and which is the companion piece to HR1, and get the filibuster gone?
I mean, it should be. I don't really know. The Senate is a black box in a lot of ways. Like, you just have to you have to just sort of guess at what Schumer is doing, and it doesn't always make a lot of sense from the outside. So I don't have a strong sense. I think that Georgia should be a reason for them to like move on that as soon as possible, because it's like highly salient and it's in the news, and people will have a clearer understanding of why this is necessary now, as opposed to if they wait a little bit longer.
Also, couldn't you really, if you decided to tackle HR/S1 first, kind of dangle a carrot for Manchin with what he wants in terms of what's going to be in that infrastructure package, which he seems pretty keen on? And I'm sure there will be direct provisions that help West Virginia in and of itself. I mean, that could be a strategy too, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm sure that the White House is working very closely with Manchin on whatever the infrastructure bill turns out to be. But I think they should make it clear to him that getting his way also, like, he needs to help get this thing through as well.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, I am still sort of, it seems odd that we have no sense of what's happening in terms of the timing or the sequencing of these bills. I mean, it doesn't, and all we're starting to hear are these stories of like, almost like these cheerleading sessions. There was, I think, a leak today that Klain had met with AOC, and I mean, I can't quite tell what's going on. If they're just, trying to, smooth out some things, or they're just getting ready to sort of like bust through the doors in some way.
Yeah, it's odd, because you're completely right. I've been, reading all the same stuff as you, and I think like remembering back to 2009, 2010, it was always sort of really clear what was happening in the Senate, in the sense of like, you knew these are the senators who are wary about this. These are the senators blocking this. This is what they're sort of trying to get through right now. Like, here are the Republicans they're going for. And like right now it's like, you just get reporting that's like, well, Warner's on the fence about changing, or, Warner's on the fence about changing the filibuster. That's like, you just get this really vague stuff that's not concrete in terms of like here's what's next on the docket. Like the fact that we don't even have a like what's next, what are we voting on next like thing is I imagine that from the Schumer perspective, he's wants to be absolutely sure he has the entire caucus on board before he even makes a move or publicly announces he's trying to do something. And like we know also that like he's not a guy who whips votes. He just sort of tries to get his people comfortable before he does anything.
He did come out and say the other day, like, the PRO Act gets a vote if you got 50 co-sponsors.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that to me seems
indirectly, though, by basically telling Ryan Graham at The Intercept to publish the story. Like, it wasn't like he came out and was, being aggressive about these 5 senators aren't supporting it.
Oh, right. No, I think but I think he's out there. I think he's basically saying, like, this is not my job. When he says that, he's saying, unions, you got to go and
absolutely
and work on these people, right? I mean, that's what he's basically saying is like, my job is just to take notes.
Yeah.
Who's voting what? And you guys are the ones, which, that's not unreasonable. Yeah. I mean, it would be
specific legislation is not unreasonable, but if there's a critique of Schumer, it's just that this is sometimes the strategy too often for everything.
Oh, without a doubt, he perceives himself as a concierge as opposed to a leader, it seems to me. But in this instance, I think like there needs to be there needs to be a push on these people. I'm definitely seeing it in the context of the filibuster, and I'm definitely seeing more of, it seems like, a concerted effort on working on not just Manchin, but cinema. I've noticed like you're starting to see more polls come out about how cinema is losing Democratic support in Arizona. Give me your take on her whole strategy, because I think like there is it's an interesting sort of fallacy that I think she has stumbled into, which is like, I can be a Democrat and be a maverick in the same way that John McCain as a Republican could be a maverick. And it doesn't work that way, does it?
The purple wig isn't enough, I think.
Yeah.
Putting aside the how she's going about it, the brand doesn't work the same way if you're a Democrat in Arizona, it seems to me.
Right. And this was maybe this is a sort of profound miscalculation on her part, because she was elected by normie Democrats, and Arizona is a state full of normie Democrats who wanted her to win, to empower Democrats to do Democratic things. There was a decent profile of her in Jacobin the other day, and I think it made a case that her political strategy is a result of timing, in that it happened in all these elections where Republicans were consolidating control over the state of Arizona. So when she gets elected first, she's a rogue left-wing Democrat with a Democratic governor. That Democratic governor ends up in the Obama administration. Republicans take control of the state in Arizona. So for her career, basically, like just sort of in a timing-wise, in state elections, it was useful to be more conservative as Republicans were like sort of consolidating state control. But at the same time, on national politics, the state's been getting purpler. And I don't know. I think that's the thing now, where it's like her sort of electoral and political strategy might just be out of date, but it's also hard to tell with her, like, what is a sort of sincere commitment? What is a sincere commitment for you? And what is like weird politicking? She's just such a strange character in that way.
Well, I guess my point is this, is that as a Republican, right, in Arizona, the idea that you could appeal to Democrats by, basically having Republican values, but claiming that you're bucking this, it works for Joe Manchin in West Virginia, because that is a 40% pro-Trump area on some level. And West Virginia has its own sort of like unique, weird sort of like politics. But as a Democrat, saying that you're, sort of like somewhat Republican friendly in Arizona, it doesn't work that way. Republicans are completely binary, it seems to in those states.
And I will say, just anecdotally, going to the Trump rally in Arizona, probably the most rabid pro-Trump rally I've been to, and I went to Tennessee and Florida. I mean, yeah.
Right. And those people are just like, I don't care what you do legislatively or what you vote for or against. You're a Democrat, and so you're evil, and that's it. End of story. I don't care what you do. I mean, I think she could, if she changed her that D to an R tomorrow, she could still get Democratic votes, and she would definitely get those Republican votes. But I don't think it works the other way around in Arizona. It seems, at least according to the polling.
Yeah, I think that the polling has certainly borne this out, and I think that's also true. It's like it's a state where it's one of the state, and there are many of these states now. It's one of the states where like the Republican, like if you are a Republican voter, you don't want someone who is a little bit conservative. You want the most conservative possible candidate, and it's like the Democrats like you're not going to be able to have a D next to your name and appeal to that vote. Period. So you have to get elected by getting more of your people to turn out to the polls, and your people will be liberal Democrats with liberal democratic values.
It's an interesting. It will be interesting to see how that plays out when it comes time for her to take that filibuster vote. Yeah. I mean, that is that to me is going to be fascinating development. So we did this last week with Ben Dixon too. I'm curious as to like, how would you grade Biden at this point? I mean,
what's the scale? Like, what am I like?
I don't know. I mean, you don't have to actually give a letter grade, but I'm just saying, what is your sense? I mean, I'm not going to tell you what we came up with last week, but it's
a test to see if you watch the show.
That's a test. So you're going to get a grade too. But I mean, honestly, I know things are slower. I guess I'll tell you what we did. We basically gave him an incomplete last. And that's not a total cop out. I mean, we could have assessed like he's failed because he did a $750 billion coronavirus package that like 250 billion of it was going to corporations. No, I mean, like he either exceeded expectations or met them with that bill, I think. And now it's just sort of.
I said that I think he's in the 80th percentile of what Biden is like. I thought Biden could be capable of as president right now. I mean, I think that maybe is that too generous with.
No, I think that's super fair. And like, I will say, like, if you told a year ago me Joe Biden's going to be president, I would have put my head in my hands. I would have been like, fuck, like, oh. Worst possible outcome, and he's exceeded the expectations of year ago me by quite a bit. I think it's worth keeping an eye on his foreign policy, because that's where he's being just as predictably bad as I would have worried about. That's exactly where it seems like there hasn't been any evolution here yet. And I think Congress really ought to. I hope we're seeing signs of them beginning to reassert themselves in that, although it's been years and decades of them sort of refusing to. Domestically, though, right, I think incomplete's right, because he's promising a lot of things that if he can deliver on will make him a fantastically successful president. And, he's got to make sure that we're not seeing, the House pass bill after bill and it just go nowhere in the Senate. Like, that's what he's got to do now. And, it's already really like fair to credit him for stuff like the fact that, my mother got a COVID-19 vaccine, and like the vaccine rollout in the United States has been very, very well done. And I think that just, Democrats campaign on this, and oftentimes they don't deliver. But having competent people be put in charge of it was good, and so like that's an impressive achievement. And I think it, and so to go back to what I was just describing, like, all right, like foreign policy wise, what are we going to do for the rest of the world on that? That's important too, you know.
Yeah, you wrote a piece about not to basically telling people don't worry so much about Republican men essentially deciding that they're going to reduce the vaccine. Why is that? Why don't worry?
So for one reason, it's that that the number of people who are hesitant about it is going to decline. It declined hugely among Black Americans already, and that will happen just as a result of sort of more information about it, but also like eventually you are going to know and see and interact with people who got the vaccine and are fine. This is a mass vaccination of every adult American. It's like not a thing where it's like, it'll be rare for you to run into it. Like you will know people. And so there's going to be some core, like there will be a core of people who are scared of getting it. But I think overall, like most adult Americans, when given access to it and when told by people they trust, like their own doctors, medical professionals, relatives, people that they actually trust, not Joe Biden, not even Trump necessarily, because, you know, like he only has a limited power to sway these people. But like access is, and hesitancy is going to decline in the United States, I think, for those reasons. And the more important thing to worry about, as I've written once or twice now, is that like it's also hugely important for the rest of the world to get access to these vaccines. Much of the global South has barely even started vaccinating anyone. There's a lot of things that the United States could be doing that we're not. There's been a lot of talk about the stockpile of the AstraZeneca vaccine that we have that we could be sending overseas. But at a simpler level, something that a lot of countries in the global South, led by India and I forget what other country, they've been asking the World Trade Organization to temporarily waive the patents on these drugs so that they can manufacture them themselves. India has the capacity to manufacture them, but there are a couple patents that like would make it, the World Trade Organization has the ability to temporarily allow them to do so, which would help enormously.
Yeah, it is stunning. I mean, you want the sort of the most grotesque, simplest, one-dimensional expression of the horrors of capitalism.
Yeah.
The idea that like the billions that they've already made is not enough, and they're basically holding this stuff ransom for the developing world. It really is. It's nuts. Let's talk a little bit about the press conference this week, because you've been doing this for quite some time. You remember the media during the aughts, and this press conference was, and we saw it actually not just with the press conference, but also sort of, I guess, last week with the, ABC going down to the border and doing their panel at the border. And, I think Meet the Press did, 43 segments on the crisis at the whatever it was. Give me your sense of what's happening with the media. It's fascinating. There's a desperate attempt to sort of return to a place that I don't think is there anymore.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't know. It's like, and I think we're talking a lot about the TV news in particular and the way they do these things, because the press conference demand is like, that's a TV news demand. When the media is like, why hasn't Joe Biden done a press conference? It's like, well, I don't think the New York Times or Washington Post really like need that to have that. They would like to have an interview with the president. They don't need a televised thing on TV for it to be a show to get eyeballs. It's like a TV thing. I think the press conference format does not give us very much interesting or newsworthy, but they are demanding, I think, as part of this desire to just make it 2006 to 2010 again. Like they know they have particular ways that they're just really grateful to go back to doing, like just things that they are grateful that they can just go back and do. And one of them, grotesquely is like using the right-wing media as their assignment editor and taking the border and effectively just turning it into a Biden scandal as opposed to a news story that should be explained to your viewers, right? And they do that by just like, you know, treating it again as like the making it into a Biden story, you know, and being like, where, like, why hasn't Biden fixed this yet and all that. And they don't actually care about the actual story of what is happening with like refugees and minors at the border.
What was amazing about that press conference is that apparently there was not a single question asked about the coronavirus. And we should be clear about something. The Biden administration, and there's certainly some areas where they haven't been as transparent as I think as promised and as we would like. But they have press briefings every day. Where, you know, Jen Psaki comes out and answers question on behalf of the administration. I mean, it's not like she's just, you know, some random person. They didn't do that for like huge stretches of time during the Trump administration. But the idea that there wouldn't be a single question of coronavirus, I mean, the problem is with that is sort of like the same problem that the Republicans had during the presidential debates. Like all of these people in that press room are operating under that libertarian principle that if I'm pursuing my own best interests, society gets what it needs. And in fact, that's not the way it works. That's a perfect example of that, right? Like everybody's like, I need to ask the question that's going to stick out.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask the most contrarian question there is, or the most absurd question, like, you know, what are your thoughts about running in 2024?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Timely stuff.
I mean, this is an ancient James Fallows observation, right? The political journalists never ask politicians questions a voter would ask. There's just the two just they don't even intercept, you know, like a TV news anchor. How often do you like compare town hall questions to a politician, which are things like when will I get the COVID-19 vaccine? You know, what is your plan for opioids? So like all these things. And then like TV news anchors will be like, what happened to Major? Where's Major?
I mean, it's fascinating, this intense, like it's almost like they don't. What do you think accounts for this? I mean, do you think it's just like sheer laziness, or is it just like the pressure of the commercial news that that drives this? I mean, look, this show does not follow the same narratives that populate cable news, and we're sort of like partially, we're a little bit neither fish nor fowl. But it definitely, there's no doubt in my mind that the numbers of views it gets is inhibited by that fact. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But at the same time, it's like, well, if I wanted to do something that was just going to get eyeballs, we could make this into a sitcom.
That's not a terrible idea. I mean, I thought you were. I honestly, I thought you were going to go like the direction I thought you were going was pornography there at the end too. If I wanted to,
of course. I mean that is of course. And there's actually been times in the past, like I think there was online shows where they had like naked people delivering the news, and it did quite well. I just don't know how much time? Then you get a little bit lazy with the crutch there, but. I mean, that's a problem that doesn't seem like it will go away.
No, it's the sort of commercial pressures seem incompatible with, like commercial pressures lead to particular ways of framing the news, and I also think it's also a side effect of our history of. The way we define nonpartisan news, which selects for people who go into that industry, who teach themselves not to care about issues. They teach themselves to think of issues abstractly rather than concretely, and they teach themselves not to care about them very much. So you think of everything in terms of narrative, you think of everything in terms of horse race, and then you don't particularly care about what the actual concrete meaning of these issues are and what happens, how the results on the ground of particular policies.
And it's so counterintuitive, right? I mean, and that was so well said by you about what mainstream journalism really does teach. Because, I mean, inherently, if you're trying to cover something, you should be passionate about the outcome or about the substance within it, though. It blows my mind that it really taught, I guess, all the wrong lessons. And then when it came to Trump, I guess, attacking the press, then that got the press to have more, I guess, emotion injected into their job, which is an odd phenomenon.
Yeah. And I mean, Sam, you and I talked about, whether or not the media, quote unquote, has learned after the riot at the Capitol, and it maybe for a few weeks, but
It's interesting, though. It doesn't feel like there is any traction being gained.
yeah, I think that's different, which is that it feels much more like they're shouting into the abyss at this point, like when they're trying to sort of I don't really know. It's funny. The border story, felt like it only existed on television, and to some extent, like the way it was treated on television felt like it only existed there. There wasn't really much conversation about it as a Biden scandal, as opposed to reading stories about immigration and as policy.
I mean, and I imagine this is going to change, and I don't want to overstate it, but I just don't recall a period like this. I mean, I guess you could say the same thing over the past 5 or 6 years, frankly, in American politics. But if you take that notion of it's almost like, I mean, what's occurring to me is sort of an analogy with the mRNA vaccines, right? Where it's like the mRNA vaccines, twist the proteins that the virus attaches to. And it sort of feels like that's happening with the media. Scandals are not sticking. It's not like that Biden necessarily is Teflon.
Yeah.
It just feels like there's a lack of interest in that type of narrative, or there's been no narrative that supports it, or that it's so sort of outlandish that that it's not working. And it's almost the same to me as, I think what's driving, these stories that we see in Axios where Biden is meeting with historians, and they all seem to walk out of there like they've just been making each other giddy with the idea. What if you did $6 trillion? That would be huge. We could start writing our history books right now. Yeah. And they all seemed the way that Axios is reporting these, he's all come out everybody's foaming at the mouth. Part of it was there was no Republican response to that $1.9 trillion bill. That just happened there was.
Well, look, I mean, Republicans are, and it's really important to be clear on because there's two things conservatives are doing. On the one hand, they're using, where they do hold power, they are abusing it very badly. But on a national level, they have checked out of the conversation. They have abdicated their role in these public debates, because they are in fantasy land. All they care about is cancel culture and Dr. Seuss. This is what their media is focusing on. This is what they're talking about amongst themselves. And when they do that, it gives Democrats license to be so no one's gonna deficit panic, really?
It is this weird thing where everybody's just sort of waiting, where's the other shoe? Where's the first shoe?
It's Home Alone, the parents aren't coming home.
Exactly. It's very, very strange. And, there was one of the things that I read about Biden's campaign was they did not at all. They studiously ignored Twitter. Right. And I think that's who knows if they actually did or not, but that seems to be sort of the the analogy. They're just like but it's almost like Twitter got shut down. Like there's no descent on the same plane. And I feel like they're starting to realize, like, if we don't even respond to Dr. Seuss, and on some level, the right doesn't need it to cross the transom in the way that it used to, right? Because it was not validated and could not make people money, essentially, could not be effective for the right if it didn't get into mainstream media, into conversation. But now, tons of people are making tons of hay out of Dr. Seuss, but they're doing it in their own sort of like big but gated community. And the fact is that, like, it's not like that is going to have some implications. Republicans could still win all the elections, but it's not going to be because of Dr. Seuss. It's going to be because of stuff that happens, like what happened in Georgia.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's what sort of we have just in this weird area, and I don't know how durable it is. I mean, I feel like this could go away in 6 weeks, or maybe this could last until 2023.
Yeah, that's the great question, because like that it feels somewhat durable to me right now because of the reasons you just said, which is that conservatives are both satisfied and making money just talking to themselves. All of them only talking to themselves. I think some Republicans are actually kind of alarmed by this, and I think that drives some of the thoughts about elected Republicans thinking about retiring and things like that. Like they're like the stuff we used to do, not only does it not work, but our side is like just having a circle jerk over here. And like if you genuinely like got elected because you wanted to like carve away at the state, you're like, come on, guys, like cancel culture. Like, look what you're letting Democrats get away with over here while you are all yelling about cancel culture.
Yeah, right to work just died in Montana, for instance, and they're talking about like eat meat on this day,
exactly,
shirt length and stuff, and trans athletes.
Yeah, I mean that's stunning. I mean, we could be 4 days away from Amazon being unionized in Bessemer, and once it happens in Bessemer, right, like it's just going to snowball at one point. And Brendan adds in, I wonder about this, with Limbaugh dead, right? I mean, Limbaugh was not that big of a presence per se during the Trump years because Trump overshadowed him. But when you think about the role that Limbaugh played when Obama won, people should go back. Rush Limbaugh for a year was the de facto Republican leader in the country. I mean, he's the one, I think, who now maybe I don't know with the timing when Mitch McConnell said like my job number one is to make sure that Barack Obama is not reelected in 2012. But Limbaugh was the one who was leading that brigade of like, we must obstruct everything. Mm-hmm. And they all followed him at that time. And it's almost like, I guess the problem is like when you rest the intellectual underpinnings of your entire political movement on one, talk radio host, you better make sure that guy's bionic.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like, I think that in many important ways, the right wing to mainstream media pipeline represented by Limbaugh and Matt Drudge, where's Matt Drudge been? Like it used to be true that like everyone in journalism would go to Matt Drudge like to decide what was important, but it was like this self-fulfilling thing. We're like, you're the ones deciding that Matt Drudge decide what's important. But that pipeline just doesn't quite exist. Like Ben Shapiro or whatever is not driving the Sunday show conversations, even though they still are dominated by conservatives. It's like what is the main subject of conversation on the right is like no longer the primary thing the rest of the media cares about.
It's fascinating because you would imagine like, right. I mean, the obvious person to sort of take over the mantle if you were from, just looking on paper, for like Rush Limbaugh, let's say, would have been Sean Hannity. But the thing that's becoming clear, I mean, I think people probably already knew this, but in the radio business, everybody would say quietly, like, if it wasn't for Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity would still be in Atlanta, in a secondary market doing, maybe, a radio show that was like, marginally syndicated. And here, look at what Sean Hannity, we just have 2 minutes here. Let's play this. This is what Sean Hannity is is talking about last night. Is he like, this is stunning. I mean, right now they're passing $1.9 trillion. They're gonna, and here it is.
But you're just another limousine, liberal socialist, hypocritical asshole who does nothing but spew anti-GOP hate and has virtually nothing positive or productive to add to any political dialogue.
He's talking about Seth Meyers. Yeah. He's not even talking about
And is anti-GOP hate, are they a protected class? I was unaware.
But I mean, let's be clear here. He's not even talking about a late night talk show host. He's talking about a late night talk.
He's talking. Yeah.
I mean, that's like stunning to me.
Headline news.
That's what they're deploying. But Alex,
Rush in like 1999 getting real pissed about Conan O'Brien. Can you imagine?
Right. Well, this would be the functional equivalent of him getting pissed about Conan O'Brien in 2008. Like, dude, like, really? I mean, or Carson Daly for that. Yeah. All right. Well, Alex Pareene, always a pleasure. Folks can check out your writing at the New Republic and listen to your podcast, The Politics of Everything. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Sam and Emma.
Thanks.
All right, quick break. We'll be right back. Wrap it up. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. We're wrapping up our week. We will be back on, Emma will be back on Monday. I'll be on vacation.
Nice.
We will be taking a break from Peacock, but you can look at our second hour show on Peacock. We do some interviews every day, 2 long form interviews. Plays at 5 p.m. I think they may run it as well at 10 p.m. You'll catch up on some of the ones that we've missed. You can find that on the Choice channel on the Peacock app. Check it out. I think you will enjoy it. In the meantime, have a great weekend. And I guess we will be keeping an eye on that Bessemer election. Finishes up on Monday. Don't know when we'll get the results, but we will see. Have a great weekend. And for those of you who are staying, smart move.
Yeah. Casual Friday, folks.
Casual Friday. You can see soft collar shirt. I'm wearing it right now. And do we have Carl? That's not his real name, but that's
admitting Carl now.
Okay. So, all right. Want to welcome to the program Carl Beijer. That is a pseudonym. Carl, how would you describe? You have you're an essayist, a columnist.
Yeah, I'm an essayist, I would say. Yeah.
And where can people find your work? Obviously on Twitter, but
yeah.
And then where else can they read your stuff?
If you just go to my website at carlbeijer.com, that's CarlBeijer. And I'm also at Jacobin sometimes, a couple other places in these times, places like that.
All right, so here, let me just set the table as to why I wanted John, because you sent me a DM, and you're writing a piece that to cut. Well, why don't you tell us what the piece is, and then I'll read off the questions, because this is I thought it would be fun to just have this conversation on air. But tell us, give us just a sense of the piece you're going to write.
Okay, so honestly, it's barely even a piece. What I want to do is I was going around surveying journalists and policy people and other people, and just asking them some basic questions about socialism and where they come down on these issues. And they're just yes or no questions, basically, insofar as they feel like they can answer yes or no.
And that was the thing for me. This is harder, and I sort of want to. One of the things I'm interested in is just sort of exploring why I find it hard that way. But so here's the questions. One is, do you consider yourself a socialist? Two, do you think the economy should ultimately be subject to management through the state? Three, do you support the abolition of private property as opposed to personal property? And four, do you think that a capitalist economy ultimately can be reformed in a way that is reasonably non-exploitive of workers? All right. So one, the only one that I feel like I could answer yes or no was basically, do you consider yourself a socialist? I don't. I mean, I don't in general. Here, I don't. It was just I should have given it to you too.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's not. It was just
behind the scenes. I texted in our G chat, and someone sent that to me.
I will send it. I'll try and send it to you.
Okay.
But so, because I don't really. I mean, I've always been averse, or never found it necessary, really, to identify the specifics of my political project. I don't even think in that way. And I think if I was ever to call myself a socialist, I think socialists would get mad and say that I'm not. And I don't consider myself that way. But let's do this. Do you consider yourself a socialist, and why?
Yes, I do. And the reason why, so to me, it's straightforward. When we talk about, say, intersectional analysis of oppression, nobody has a problem calling themselves a feminist. Nobody has a problem calling themselves an anti-racist. All of these different kinds of oppression, it's very easy for them to say, yeah, I don't agree with this. But then when we start talking about the exploitation of workers and the oppression of workers, suddenly the question becomes very complicated, and people don't feel comfortable with saying, no, I oppose that. I'm not okay with that. And, so when we talk about socialism, we're talking about a specific program to end these problems in much the same way as anti-racism is a specific program to end the problem of racism.
But for instance, I am against the exploitation of workers. I guess maybe it's, that takes us down to 4 when we talk about what reasonable means. But I feel like I'm against the exploitation of workers.
Okay.
I feel like the bar to socialism is higher. I mean, I don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, I probably, if I don't know, maybe I identify as a feminist. I probably would say I'm feministic. Maybe. I mean, I tend not to do that anyways. But if I'm against the exploitation of workers, right? Really, I mean, by exploitation of workers, are we just talking about any type of hiring relationship?
I mean, yeah, we are talking about just the extraction of their surplus value when they work. They have worked for this and yet they don't get it because they're being exploited. And we're talking about all the different conditions that emerge from capitalism, terrible work conditions, long hours, all of the stuff that I would argue is a direct inevitable consequence of a capitalist economy. So for me, it's very straightforward to say, yes, I oppose these things, therefore I am a socialist.
So a good question might be, do you think exploitation of workers is inherent to is inextricable from capitalism?
Well, actually, that is the fourth question that he does ask.
Well, I skimmed it.
Hold on. But all right, so let's jump to well, I mean, I want to do the order that you have in there, Justice. So number two, okay. So number two, do you think the economy should ultimately be subject to management through the state? I think it already is subject. I think it's just the problem I would have with it right now is that it's managed for the benefit of the wrong people.
Mm-hmm. So we do have cases where the government simply is not allowed to do certain things with property. We have rules about when eminent domain is and is not allowed to seize property. We have rules. That's like 90% of the law, right? Property is the law. So we do have all these rules that their major function is to restrict the government from exercising unlimited control over property. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't exercise any control over property. They obviously do, and they do it in a way that benefits the rich. But if the overwhelming majority of Americans today were to say something, were to make a decision like we want to tax the rich, which is extremely popular, or we want to, we want limits on gun control, which is a private property issue in a way. We can't do that. We have all of these limits in place in our government to prevent the Democratic majority from exercising unlimited control over property.
But isn't that, don't we have that as a function? That is the way in which the state is managing, right? Those things. The state, in my mind, the state sets up this. It's not like some third party has created these rules. Although, I suppose you could argue maybe with gun control. With the Second Amendment, you could argue that the Supreme Court has sort of imposed their interpretation on it, which was a fairly novel interpretation as of 15 years ago. But these laws, all of these laws, come from the state, right? That's my point. Is that the state is managing it by saying we're going to, setting up the system as if it was like a third party that created these laws.
Mm-hmm. That's where I think some of the ambiguity of these questions always comes in, because it becomes a question of, it becomes a question of, to what extent are people exercising control over the economy through the state? So we have things like the Fourth Amendment, which limits unreasonable searches and seizures and stuff like that. That doesn't just protect innocent people and good people. That also ends up protecting capital in a lot of ways. We cannot exercise control over property without overturning that amendment. So yeah, in theory, you could rewrite the Constitution, I suppose, have a constitutional convention or pass an amendment or whatever. And so you could say in that kind of, I think it's a very remote academic sense that people that the state, people are exercising control over the economy through the state. But I would not say that, in fact, that's really what's going on. We have all of these institutionalized barriers that prevent that from happening.
So, so if you were to answer number two, do you think the economy should ultimately be subject to the management through the state? You would answer no.
No, I would answer yes, absolutely. I think that the state is the instrument through which people manage the economy, and I think that's not what is going on at this point. Because
I see what you're saying. So the Constitution is in many respects the restraining the state as a manifestation of the will of the people.
That's what it was designed to do. That's what our government was designed to do, was to prevent the tyranny of the majority. James Madison was very explicit about that. And I think it works. I think it does exactly what it was intended to do.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt the Constitution was set up to protect property owners, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, without a doubt. I know. So
well, Matt makes a good point in that, democratizing the state and making sure that it's a more direct democracy is probably needed first before any of those dominoes can fall. Would you agree, Carl?
I don't know what the order of operations is, honestly. I'm pretty agnostic about that. But when I think about socialism, a question that I ask is your end game here absolute democratic control of the state or not, or of property or not? And there are a lot of progressives who would say no, absolutely not. Elizabeth Warren, for example, she would say no. I'm a capitalist to my bones. I do not think that people should have this sort of unlimited control over what property is doing. There should be this institution of private property that is protected.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I still am not sure how I would answer that question. I mean, I think I see the Constitution as an extension of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I would overthrow the entire Constitution, but there are definitely provisions I have a problem with, without a doubt. All right, well, let's go to number three. Do you support the abolition of private property as opposed to personal property? Will you just walk us through the distinction between private property and personal property?
So, yeah, I think that the best way to understand it is it's a provisional distinction. And what that means is that, the state government in very, socialist countries, it's not like you have government bureaucrats controlling everybody's toothbrush. Or, in Norway, every single tiny little thing that goes on in its energy sector, you have kind of this broad high level management of what's going on. But then you have a lot of autonomy with what's going on with property. The government, people don't feel this need to control it. So when I talk about private property, what I say is, you should not have this absolute right, say, to control a plot of land. And if the entire rest of the world the rest of the country says we need this land for such and such a reason, you don't have this private control over it, but you do have this sort of provisional control over it. The rest of the country isn't constantly telling you what to do with it. So it's not like this sort of what people imagine this communist dystopia is, where a government agent is coming and telling you when you can use the bathroom or when you can brush your teeth or all of this stuff. There is a provisional control of property, but then there's sort of a legal and authoritative de facto control of property that is going on by the people through the state, if that makes sense.
So in it does, I guess. Like I mean, I guess So is that ultimately I guess I'm not sure I fully understand it. So
Okay.
so I mean, like we have eminent domain in this country, right? The state can, the state can take your property. I mean, Kelo said that the state could take the property if they want tax revenue. In this instance, or they think giving it to a different private entity will raise tax revenue. Is that the dynamic that you're saying? That like I'm not sure what the distinction of private property and personal property is there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, eminent domain is a kind of useful comparison the way that we talk about it, because while eminent domain does give sort of routes for the government to step in and under certain circumstances, if you're building a train and you need to cross property, or if you're building sewers or something like that, the government can do it. But the government can't just do it for any old reason, if the Democratic majority just decided, this field is beautiful, we want to preserve it, we don't want it ever to be developed. Well, they don't necessarily always have the ability to do that. And we've seen that happen actually in a lot of cases. So what I would talk about in this case is private property should be understood as a sort of set of institutions and norms and laws that prevent the public from even possibly exercising control over property. Now, that doesn't mean that they do all the time, right? They aren't taking your toothbrush, but they have no opportunity in a lot of cases in this country. And in most countries, I would say it's all a matter of degree, right? So people are never exercising absolute control.
And I mean, I guess I always understood it as being like essentially private property was really just sort of like any type of property that is used to derive profits, right? Like that maybe like any type of like means of production. And personal property was the stuff that you actually use at any given point. Do I have that wrong?
Well, there are different ways of thinking about it. And I think it sort of depends on what aspect of the economy you're analyzing. But, like Marx writes, freedom can only consist in this, that socialized man govern the human metabolism with nature in a rational way, bringing it under their collective control instead of being dominated by it as a blind power. And he uses that kind of phrasing a lot. And what he's talking about is there's this problem under capitalism where the community cannot exercise rational control over the economy, over property, over what's going on. There are these weird limits that we've set in place to what they are and are not able to do. And so a big part of the abolition of private property is just tearing down these arbitrary limits that prevent people from doing that. And so if you do that, then you do end up throwing a wrench in the ability of capitalists to exploit your labor and things like that. But just the abolition of private property here is the first step.
So you're really abolishing the concept of any property that you own being protected from the state or as a manifestation of the will of the people.
Yes.
Okay. And and that can apply to anything, like my coffee mug, if I wanted it to, or the podcast, or the guy who owns this building.
I think it can. And that idea is obviously scary to people who imagine the government doing all kinds of horrible things with property that they want to think of as theirs and that they want to control. But I think that is sort of the battlefield of politics, right? That is where where our task as people as socialists is to prevent the government from exercising this kind of tyrannical control and trying to make it function in rational ways rather than irrational ways. That's why Marx says, it talks about rational control.
How does that, and there's no limiting principle, but how does it, right? I mean, that's the point. There's no limiting principle. Yeah. How does that, what's the check on that though? I mean, I get it that we need to be rational, but there's no institutional check on that, or there's no tension. It's really just a function of our own rationality in that society.
I mean, even we shouldn't fool ourselves. Even when we build these institutional checks, we are sort of trying to exercise our rationality and saying, okay, this is a check that makes sense. This is a constraint on the government that makes sense. A problem with that comes up is a lot of times it's too rigid, and it becomes the set rule, and suddenly in cases it becomes irrational. So I think that the check on what the government can and cannot do is in the end always, it always has to do with the will of the people and what they are willing and not willing to push back against collectively. And I think that getting rid of private property demystifies that and makes the struggle over power, these struggles over property, very clear. And I think that's a good thing. It really exposes us to the sort of brute reality of what a lot of political struggle is. But I think that also gives us an opportunity to see it clearly and to manage it in a more rational way.
All right, that makes sense. Number 4, do you think that a capitalist economy ultimately can be reformed in a way that is reasonably non-exploitive of workers? What does reasonably mean here? That was one of my big questions.
Yeah. So, when you're engaged in any kind of collective endeavor, you are going to have situations where, say, somebody is working a little harder than usual. Maybe sometimes you might have a global pandemic, and suddenly nurses are required to work extremely long hours. And I think this is not ideal for them. It's not something they want to do, but I think everybody sort of understands this is just something that has to happen in a rational, functional society. So there are situations where workers are not always just doing exactly what they want and living in a utopia. In a sort of sane society, that's not happening. But I think that when you abolish private property and when they're controlling the means of production because of that, because it's collectively controlled, that exploitation is being minimized as much as possible in that sense, as much as they're able to minimize it.
So in other words, if it's a car factory, workers are going to have far more participation in the value of the output of that car factory. But there may be times where, like, we had a production run or we had a problem and we need, I'm just trying to sort of get into, that concept more as to like what reasonably constitutes.
Yeah. Well, I think again,
well, give me an example of unreasonable.
Unreasonable. An example of unreasonable is when you are manufacturing a commodity that society doesn't need just for somebody to get richer and wealthier and really having more money than they need. And there are an infinite number of examples of that happening in our world. But socialism has to be able to accommodate situations like pandemics where nurses have to work hard, wartime economies, disasters, situations where it's less than ideal for workers. And that's why this is collectively managed by the state, by everybody, or everybody is managing it through the state, rather.
And I think my answer to this would have been like, I tend to doubt it, but probably need to get further down the road with some of those reforms to make that assessment. Like, how much of all this is on a sliding scale, like a matter of degree? I mean, that was the tough part for me with, I think, a lot of the yes or no stuff, was that, you cited Norway as being a socialist country, but there's some capitalism there, right?
Well, I mean, so, one way, for example, when we're talking about countries, you can talk about the degree to which they're socialized, say, through the percent of national wealth owned by the government. And Norway is a country where something like 55% of the national wealth, at least like as of 2014, was owned by the government. That's a lot. So, yeah, I do think like you do have to talk about it. There's no yes socialist, not socialist. Like, I don't think that makes sense. But I think as a person, or sort of as your own politics, what sort of makes you a socialist or not a socialist is that the direction that we want to move in, towards 100% nationalization, towards the state owning and people collectively controlling all of this property? Or do you not actually want that to happen? Do you sort of pull back and stop short and say, we think that there still should be private property that the demos does not have control over? I think that's what distinguishes a socialist from not a socialist, or at least a very major thing.
As opposed to a country, which is more on a degree.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to I mean, as soon as we start talking about that, you start drawing arbitrary lines like, okay, what percentage of national wealth makes a country socialist? And some people have tried to do that before, but I don't think it really makes sense.
I see. Okay, because and give me a sense of like what that 55. I mean, because if I was to say like, well, I have no problem with 55%, let's say. I mean, I don't know what that constitutes in the context of Norway, but when I've always like thought about, I mean, for me, I tend to think of politics just like almost exclusively based upon outcomes. And so for me, like, I would like to see energy production. I would like to see the internet. I would like to see at least payments of healthcare, and I think probably maybe even delivery of healthcare ultimately nationalized. I don't know where I'm at now at that point in terms of like what that constitutes in terms of government, control of wealth at that point. But I gotta think that's close to energy, healthcare, transportation, in terms of like public transport or cars. Which one? I would say it's certainly public transport, like Amtrak and
do you think, like, would you like to see, okay, so for example, the government's already building highways, right? Like, we already have this elaborate system of roads that the government has created for the explicit purpose of letting people use cars and travel all over the place. So it's really more of a question here of, okay, well, how is the government going to deliver on this goal of being able to move people around, or being able to facilitate that? And I think that once you ask that question, you say, I say, well, whatever makes sense. Whatever the majority of people decide makes sense, but the people should be able to decide that through the state. It shouldn't be left up to some random automaker who's just interested in his own profits making that decision. Because when that happens, you end up with all kinds of very strange situations, like, people delaying conversion to to electric cars and things like that. I think so. It's often a question like that of, okay, well, do you think that running this, is there a sensible way for this industry to be run? And why should any particular person be able to say, I think it should be run unsensibly if the majority of people disagree?
But don't we have the ability right now through the state to do like cafe standards and to say, like, I mean, couldn't we say tomorrow by, you guys got 5 years and it has to be all electric?
There are all kinds of restrictions to the government's ability to regulate things, and they'll take you to court and say that's unconstitutional.
But we do that, don't we? I mean, haven't we set cafe standards? So we set, like, I mean, it's just a question of, like, I mean, we could say, if we can say you need to have your fleet of cars needs to be average 40 miles per gallon, let's say. I don't know exactly what it is. It was just raised. 40 miles gallon. And if we can say 40 miles a gallon, we could say, like, you know what? Your fleet of cars needs to be 70 miles a gallon.
Yeah.
At that point, they're going to go, it's just easier for us to convert to electric. I mean, it's conceivable to me that we could say, like, your fleet of cars needs to be 200 miles per gallon, which, essentially is saying, like, you can have a little bit of, fossil fuel in there if you want, but it has to be electric beyond that. I mean, we have the ability to do that today.
So we do. It's more complicated than that. Like, when you try to impose these regulations, it depends on what kind of regulation you're trying to impose. And there are various tests that get applied for, is this reasonable or is this not? And a lot of times you'll just have like one or two judges who sit there and decide, okay, this is in the public interest, in my opinion. And so if the majority of people disagree with this one judge, they have no choice. And it gets the regulation gets thrown out, and it can't be applied because one judge has decided it's not in the public interest. One judge decides that, okay, these environmental standards, they're too onerous. They would hurt the bottom line of this company too much to be imposed on it. So I don't think that it's appropriate for us to impose these. We're throwing them out. And that kind of thing happens a lot.
No, without a doubt. Believe me. I mean, and we have, I think we're going to have a Supreme Court that's going to basically say, I mean, in the context of making that assessment, I mean, specific to this, the EPA, I think they've reversed that Trump rule about making that cost benefit analysis, but it could very well be inhibited by the Supreme Court. So a socialist country necessarily gets rid of judges that will assess. So how do we make sure that there's an efficiency of the country saying, and I don't know if in this country we would actually, frankly, we would all vote for, let's say, an all electric fleet of cars, but it is what it is at that point. How do we make sure that the will of the people is so efficiently manifested in our elected officials?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of room for disagreement there. And I think that that's I think that's essentially an administrative problem. How do we organize a government like this? So, for example, I think that having a Senate, which is based on this principle of protecting land ownership rather than people, I don't think it makes sense to have a kind of legislature like that. I do think that some kind of representative legislature does make sense, subject to elections and things like that. I think there are a lot of cases where direct democracy would be silly to solve that. I don't think that, frankly, a lot of people would want to be involved in direct democracy trying to solve a lot of questions. But the bottom line is there some way that, and some very reasonable way, that people can, if they really want to, make this decision about how the economy should be run, how this piece of property should be managed, and they're able to enact it through the state. I think that a lot of cases we don't.
If I don't believe that if there is like a way to efficiently do that, is it impossible for me to be a socialist?
I think that, so what I would say is I think most people do think that there is a way for the economy to be managed reasonably. Most Americans tend to think that, yeah, we have this system in place that does it. And so a lot of the controversy here about how you structure representation, like I said, is administrative. If you think that's just absolutely impossible, that sounds to me like the concept of governance is not possible, that we can't do that. And that is, I suppose that's a serious objection. I don't think that you could call yourself a socialist in this case. You would probably call yourself some kind of anarchist or whatever.
I just don't know that we can do it. I just don't know that we can have a system that is ever really going to efficiently communicate that. With that type of consolidation of power. That's my only concern. That's a big concern for me. I mean, for me, like, the thing I like about a 55% type of situation is that on the whole, I think that I am really skeptical that capitalism can eliminate worker exploitation, but I'm also concerned about all sorts of different systems not being exploitive in some fashion or another, or being, and so the closer we can get to some measure of tension, that I'm in favor of. It's not inconceivable to me that we get to 55% and I'm like, oh, 75% is looking pretty good from this 55% vantage. I guess maybe I'm in that respect,
I would say that sort of a persistent socialist position on this is that if you do not get to 100%, if you keep private capital and you keep the little concentrations of power that come with private capital, that eventually that 45% that is private property starts growing and taking back stuff from the commons, like we've seen all over the world, privatizing. And so in the end, you're kind of picking your poison in a sense, right? Do you want to be managed by these unaccountable corporations, or do you want to give democratic management a shot?
I think that last point you made about, any of it, if you leave any of it alive, it can metastasize is I think a fairly strong point. I mean, that is always that. I mean, and that is, then you look at something like, Piketty, and you see that maybe we're just reverting to the mean in some respect. But
Well, Carl, on that point, would leaving certain things in, like, I'm thinking about media versus the oil industry, for instance, right? Like having some distance between the state, and I don't, I'm pretty much supportive of the state intervening, but is there anything in terms of that you would stress or emphasize?
Do you mean in terms of what the media, how the government would control the media? I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Oh, sorry. I muted myself for a second there. Yeah, I guess I think I'm generally of the like, you can't leave any of it, but I think there is a difference between leaving like the oil industry versus leaving media as, maybe a carve out, maybe because we have some sort of new version of the First Amendment after the revolution where, media is not as controlled by the state. But I don't know. What do you have any thoughts on distinctions between industries like that?
Yeah. So I think so for the media, we have this idea that, okay, a lot of people think that it's rational to have to have this rule in place saying that the government can't control the media. We have a First Amendment in place that says that it can't do it. Is that what we want to lean on to protect media independence and media autonomy? Or do we want to lean on a population that values that values sort of liberal ideas about thought and speech and pluralism? So you're picking one strategy to protect it either way. And the only question is, which one are you relying on?
Oh, all right. All right. Well, so Carl, let me ask you. I think to a certain extent, I may be. My perspective is certainly more legalistic than I think one would want for a
You don't say.
a social. I think so. But all right. Let me ask you this: Is it possible for me to be a socialist and operate this podcast? I employ people on this podcast. Is that like? Am I DOA at that?
No, absolutely not. You're not the linchpin of capitalism. Okay. If you go away, capitalism is still going to be with us.
Whoa. You don't know that. No idea what sits behind these panels.
We are all participating in a capitalist economy, every one of us. There's no way outside of it. So the question is not whether you are participating in this economy. That's not what holds it up. If you're a socialist, you think that this class of extremely wealthy people are what's holding up the capitalist system. Not,
but I am more. Am I not more capitalistic for the fact that I am higher? I hire workers on this show.
Is it your money?
Is it my money? What do you mean? Is it my money?
Well,
Is it coming out of your pocket, or do you have sponsors who are actually funding a media?
Ads. We have ads and members who support the show.
Right. Yeah. So there is this kind of structure in place that is paying the workers. I think that it's always tricky. You're getting into a kind of different question of how do we define classes and make a distinction between class or another. And you're asking me, do you belong to the capitalist class? My answer to that is I don't know much about your wealth and finances and things like that, but I would.
It's this show runs on the members and the ads that we read and that we have on YouTube.
Okay. If you lost all of that today, and could you just never work again and be fun?
If I never worked again today, would I have fun?
No. Would you be fine? Would you be okay? Do you need
financially?
Financially?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm getting close to retirement, but I'm not quite there.
So you do need to sell your labor to survive.
I mean, I think so. It probably depends on how long I live.
Because there are a lot of people out there who will never have to work a day again.
Yeah,
and that's it.
I don't know what
but that's what everybody would like.
That's what everybody would like. But that is a very important distinction. They're in a very different situation from somebody who ultimately, if you could not get work anywhere else, you might end up in a very sort of degrading and oppressive situation because you're working for a terrible employer just to get by.
Could get in any other work, to be honest with you. Sad to say, but that is. But yes, I mean, I definitely think I sell my labor. I mean, I'm here every day. People can watch me do it.
Mm-hmm. But what
the bathrooms.
But do you sell it? Do you sell to survive? So you have people like Bill Gates, who is certainly working still in a sense, but he doesn't need to.
No, I understand. I will make you this vow, folks. If I don't need to work, I won't be here. But I'm getting old.
Yeah. I find that hard to believe. I think you enjoy it.
I enjoy it. I would probably enjoy it like a couple times a week.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Carl, this has been really interesting. I mean, now you understand like why I couldn't do yes or no on this. I just had too many questions, and I think like it is maybe a deficit of my mind that I just don't frame things in this way. But I don't know if that helps with the chart.
No, that's interesting. As a socialist, I want to frame things in that way. So what I'm interested in is, are there other journalists and policymakers and people like there who are thinking like me and who are thinking like a lot of socialists about this? Or do they kind of have a different way of thinking about it, which may not sort of align with sort of a orthodox understanding of socialism?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm probably in the former, but maybe somewhere, maybe there's like I'm certainly, I think, open to it. I mean, I think just my sight is more limited, I think, just in terms of my vision on some level. And that may be a lack of imagination. But much appreciated, Carl. And folks can check out again. Will you give your website and your Twitter handle?
Yeah, they're both. So the name is Carl Beijer. That's CarlBeijer, and you can find me on Twitter under that name, one word, or you can go to carlbeijer.com, one word, and that's my site.
And you've been retired from basketball for a long time, right?
Yeah, a couple decades now. It's been a while.
Are you a Allen Iverson fan? This is my contribution to the conversation.
Am I an Allen Iverson fan? Yeah. I'm a massive Allen Iverson fan. I actually wrote an article about it, but he's just my hero. He's such an inspiring figure. I love him.
Yes, they did a good 30 for 30 on that.
Yes.
It's like I'm a Knicks fan, so I obviously I didn't. I try not to root for him, but he's the man.
All right, Carl, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good talking to you.
Talking to you too. All right, folks, I guess we're going to do a freebie Friday.
I guess.
Just, to get with the, mood. That was really interesting and fun for me. I was looking forward to that all week, frankly.
It's sort of like, when boxers, I don't know if you try to box the other way, leading with the other hand, like you talking to a libertarian, like there's some sort of like bizarro world. You talking to Carl like that. I mean, and you both a lot of the arguments you used, I think, were very similar. Like, don't we already do this, or we can do this about, controlling property, right? It's just interesting to see you talk to somebody who's not insane about those things.
Exactly. I mean, it's a different, and frankly, I am far more comfortable, obviously, heading down that route. There's a skepticism of how we can achieve that successfully that is very different than my perspective on libertarianism, which is just bunk. I mean, and I mean, I guess it just comes down, I've said this many times before, right? Like, I have no problem heading down that highway, towards socialism. I don't know that we could ever get to the end result, but all the results that we will pass along the way. I am
in favor of the gains along the road. Right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, all right. Let's see here. All right, let's go to. I haven't even called it. We're not going to get any phone calls today. I don't want people holding on, and that would not be fair. But we'll do some IMs. Appivina, going to have a hard time convincing me that Brian Kemp wasn't covering for his own shady 2018 election when he seemed to speed right past Republican concerns over the 2020 election. I wonder. Private ownership of toothbrushes by individuals benefits the majority. Private ownership of the means of production does not benefit the majority. Fair enough. Cootie loose. Sam, please don't forget about the door praising Rubin clip today. Love your entire audience.
Yeah.
All right, let's play this. Do we have this clip?
I mean, I think I pulled it for Monday, so
let's pull it up here. Neutrino. That's singularity, right? We'll get there. Tell me when you got it, Brendan. Hey, I'm Mark Crew. I passed my candidacy exam last Friday for my PhD program. Now I'm one step closer to being a true liberal elite. Thanks for all of you keeping me company while I prepared. Listening to the show was one of the few things I allowed myself to do for fun, and it was worth it. Best to you all. Hope you have a great weekend. Congratulations. That's very exciting. Okay, Brendan's got it. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all of this talk of the singularity. Well, here it is. It's all boiled into one.
Like
Many of you have spent years remarking how Dave Rubin is literally a joke. And to be honest, we have many times referred to him as, contextualize him as a butt of a joke. What Dave Rubin does is have people on and say things to, like in the past, Stefan Molyneux. We are the center. We express the center.
I agree. I mean, I remember a clip of him not pushing back on a guest that said white people have bigger brains than black people. That's kind of what he does.
Yes, and we go on
He's
and on and
a warm
on.
body for reprehensible people to say things to him and communicate their message.
Was at one point financed by libertarian outfits. Barely mentioned that, bringing these guests on. That's all right. I mean, it's what, we have a word for that. It's called an infomercial. But did you know he was a journalist? And here we're going to be told that he is.
In that article, it said they talked about Dave Rubin, and they said Dave Rubin, who has interviewed white nationalists, this and that, and Bob, and they named everything anti-this and anti-trans activists, and that. And I go, yeah, he does an interview show. That's what, if you're a journalist, you could say that about fucking Walter Cronkite. You could say that about anybody who's supposed to be doing interviews. They're supposed to be interviewing fucking people from all walks of life. Phil Donahue. I grew up on Phil Donahue. I know who David Duke is because he was a regular on the fucking Phil Donahue show. This idea that interviewing people who are outrageous is wrong, people who are way out of line with you politically, that is again, that is the establishment trying to control the narrative, and they're trying to keep you in your siloed away and fighting each other. That's all that is. And they're really ramping that up now because that's all they got. Because as soon as the Americans realize that this is a class war and not a left-right war, the establishment is fucked. And they're coming closer to realizing that.
Okay, now look, you could isolate any series of words and it would actually be something that you might be able to agree with, right? Like, journalists should have people from all sorts of walks of life on their shows. I mean, people have different specialties that they deal with and this and that. But the point is that when you have these freaks, like he cited, Bill Donahue did have David Duke on.
Cenk had David Duke on very
The
famously.
point is that you question them and interrogate them and their intent and their motives. That is
and have a confrontational sort of posture.
And you attack the underpinnings of white supremacy, as I'm sure Phil Donahue did, and as Jay did when he had David Duke on. Yes.
Of course. And Dave Rubin explicitly doesn't do that.
That's what he's there for. He's there not to do that.
In fact, not only is he there to not do that, he's there to make it seem like he's doing that. He's there to literally misinform you as to where they're coming from. So, for instance, you know, and the reason why, and then that's the sort of like just the textual analysis. And I would also say, like, the idea that the establishment doesn't want you to perceive Dave Rubin as a journalist. Like, I don't even know, I can't even wrap my head around that so much as what that even means. Like, the establishment is not, it's probably in many respects not too concerned about what Dave Rubin does.
In fact, they might appreciate his continued covering up of white supremacy and the corruption of the Republican Party. I'm sure corporate America, if that's what Jimmy's referring to, is quite thrilled with whatever role Rubin plays in that.
And then the idea that somehow the notion of right and left is like, and presumably he's talking about, I mean, I don't know. He said like racist or white supremacist, whatever it was. Like, if that's what he's talking about, that they want you, if he is saying that that doesn't exist, that notion of white supremacy and racism is a construct that doesn't exist, that is simply there as some type of smokescreen. It is an illusion that is there to keep you from being conscious of your class. The existence of racism. Now, I understand the argument that racism is deployed, that racism is a thing, like a hammer, and it's deployed in the service of capital. I understand that critique. But the idea that racism doesn't exist, that the implications of racism are illusory,
are a tool by the establishment, right? I mean, he's basically using the 2016, Bernie Sanders with smears of sexist critique and just like extrapolating it and applying it to everything.
Well, what he's doing is he's just basically trying to justify his own idiocy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it is.
Oh, no, it's further than that, Sam, because he is trying to justify his continued appearances on Tucker Carlson's program. So this is the same critique that, he gets for going on Tucker Carlson, right? Is that he's not confrontation, or he's criticized for going on someone's program, basically. The issue is that when Jimmy goes on Tucker Carlson's program, much like when Dave Rubin interviews these reprehensible people, it is not a combative interview. It is this is why we agree. Tucker Carlson uses Jimmy in order to rail against the Democratic Party for his very specific ends, much like the guests on Dave Rubin's show use him in order to push their white supremacy, their bigotry, their pro-Republican Party views, etc. So that's part of why Jimmy's doing this as well.
But I wonder if he even has that deep of it's just, I mean, it's so clearly just the function of all the people to try and support Dave Rubin. Boy.
Well, he's about to make that turn, and that's where we're at, right? He's about to make that turn. He's getting closer and closer to the Dave Rubin turn, where Rubin, the reason that he left the left was because they wouldn't call Muslim people barbaric in the way that he basically wanted to. And now Jimmy's basically trying to do the same triangulation or pivot.
Well, I mean, if racism is really just and there's no doubt, again, I mean, you can have anti-racism and it be a cover for, it could be corporate whitewashing or whatnot.
Absolutely.
But the idea that racism doesn't exist, that this is just manufactured to keep us apart, is just absurd. It exists. Racism exists. It is deployed by our institutions. It is deployed by at different times in our history.
It was an explicit legal structure for hundreds of years in this country.
He would balk at that notion. Okay, but he would say, I never said racism doesn't exist. And I'm sure that's some aside that Jimmy would put in a video. But he does constantly downplay its role in society and in policy for purely aesthetic. I don't like how the Democratic Party corporatizes and deploys racism in order to cover up.
But that's not what he's saying in that statement. He may not be conscious of what he's saying in that statement, frankly. But here, play it again. Let's listen to this and let's take it step by step, because I want people really should understand why this is so ridiculous.
I'm just trying to narrow the critique to just kind of nail him on it. That's all.
Well, here, listen to what he's saying here, though.
In that article, it said they talked about Dave Rubin, and they said Dave Rubin, who has interviewed white nationalists, this and that, and and they named everything anti-this and anti-trans activists and that. And I go,
Holocaust deniers.
He does an interview show. That's what, if you're a journalist, you could say that about fucking Walter Cronkite. You could say that about anybody who's supposed to be doing interviews. They're supposed to be interviewing fucking people from all walks of life. Phil Donahue. I grew up on Phil Donahue.
Now, I don't know if he is just if he just doesn't understand what he's reading and what the implications are, or if he's just pretending. I don't know. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He could be just dumb. That he doesn't understand that the critique is not that these people showed up there. It's that they showed up there and were completely unchallenged in their belief systems whatsoever, which Walter Cronkite and Phil Donahue exactly did not do. So Dave Rubin is fundamentally different than Walter Cronkite. They could have the exact same guests on there.
I just want to say, they have their guests on for the... Sorry, go on, Sam.
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
The reason that they have on to have a conflict with it. The reason Jimmy Dore has those guys on is to talk about how crazy the left is, which is exactly the same reason that Dave Rubin had Tommy Sotomayor, who was a Holocaust denier, bigot who didn't know Rubin was gay when he talked to him and found out later. It's the same project.
It's the same reason Tucker Carlson has people on.
Right.
So Jimmy is operating in the same space as Tucker Carlson right now.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, at one point he's the hammer, one point he's the nail.
Right.
Go. Keep going here.
I know who David Duke is because he was a regular on the fucking Phil Donahue show. This idea that interviewing people who are outrageous is wrong, people who are way out of line with you politically,
not framing them that way.
Again, that is the establishment trying to control the narrative, and they're trying to keep you in your siloed away and fighting each other. That's all that is, and they're really ramping that up now because that's all they got. Because as soon as the class,
who is each other? Who is each other? Is whites keep us from fighting white supremacists? Hell fucking yeah, I want to fight white supremacists.
That's the whole point, is that he's saying there, this is fake constructs. Is he saying that David Duke was not a white supremacist, that it was the establishment who was making it look like they were white supremacists? That's what I'm saying. Right there in that moment, what he's saying is, now it could be he's just an idiot and just blathering. And maybe he is. And I don't know that in any way mitigates the damage that the dangerousness of that. The idea that none of this is real. This is all just manufactured by the establishment. Whoa, what establishment? What establishment?
He's just trying to play the hits. He's an old rock star who's just still playing the same song, one hit wonder.
I guess the problem is he's getting the words all wrong.
Yeah.
Here, just continue. Let's just finish it up here.
By the way, Aaron Mate, speaking of no pushback.
Go ahead.
Well, we don't know if he maybe after the clip was really harsh on.
that is, and they're really ramping that up now because that's all they got. Because as soon as the Americans realize that this is a class war and not a left-right war, the establishment is fucked, and they're coming closer to realizing that.
Okay, so now wait a second.
Now we're back to class reduction.
Well, but no, but it's worse than that because as soon as we understand it's not a left-right war, so I guess that is what he is saying there is that the only people that he's pitted against here are, people who are sort of like complaining about Dave Rubin platforming white supremacists, and he mentions David Duke, right? So the left-right in his mind is the KKK and not. And he doesn't seem to understand that, like, sort of, I guess his argument is that the right has, that there's no class element to left-wing politics, and that the left-right thing is a false dichotomy, and he's defining that left-right thing as essentially, he's only mentioned KKK and white supremacists and not. That's the sort of like miasma that he's like, spewing out there. I don't know. It's
Tucker. He's got his audience more and more from Tucker Carlson. Let's just be real about that, right? Like that's where he's getting views from. So he's not going to say anything that's going to, upset that.
Just this is where we're at, though. Is the point is that that's exactly right, Matt. It's not a left-wing audience anymore. I don't have the data on that, but this seems fairly clear, and it's the same Rubin turn. We are watching it in real time. Just making that clear.
Let's see.
I think we thoroughly dismantled that.
Yeah, I think we probably we teased it for a week, so we might as well spend the time on that.
That was just the two of them coming together. Really, what a team.
Here is Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, sorry. Go on.
Let's do this clip. Dan Crenshaw. This has been impressive. I don't know if it was just that the Biden administration came in, had a lot of confidence in their ability to deliver all these shots and manage expectations when they said 100 million shots in 100 days. But when we heard that, 60 days ago or whenever it was, 90 days ago, we were like, let's hope.
It was seen as ambitious.
We kept saying, I remember I'm going to get a shot by, August or September. And then I was like, I'm going to get a shot by, maybe by July. And then I was like, maybe April, May in New York State. I think everybody's going to have a shot by the time we get to June 1st. Everybody who wants one, I think, is going to be eligible to get a shot. They have delivered now. Here's Dan Crenshaw saying he would be impressed if Biden could deliver 200 million shots in 100 days, not this 100 million.
And then after that, we have a clip of Biden.
Yeah, well, let's play this first.
Yeah.
Distribute hundreds of millions of vaccines, but it's getting done. If the Biden administration wants to impress us, you know what? Double the goal. Say 200 million vaccines in 100 days. I will be impressed. I'll go on the record right now, say that I will be impressed if you can.
Pause it. There you go. All right. So there is Dan Crenshaw saying he will be impressed. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dan Crenshaw's predicate for him coming back on that show and saying he was impressed.
Now today I'm setting a second goal, and that is we will, by my 100th day in office, have administered 200 million shots in people's arms. That's right, 200 million shots in 100 days. I know it's ambitious, twice our original goal, but no other country in the world has even come close, not even close to what we are doing. And I believe we can do it. And today,
charge. There you go. It's impressive. The rollout in this country has been impressive of the vaccine. There's just like no two ways about it.
Yeah.
And you compare this relative to the rest of the world. Alex Pareene on the program had a good point. Now is time to sort of deploy the AstraZeneca send our reserves, and start and really rip off the patents on these things and say, Defense Production Act, whatever it is that you need to do it. There are legal mechanisms to do it, without a doubt, where we can basically say this is now going to be royalty free. Boom, and that's it.
Well, Dan Crenshaw, though, did that? Did we hear of any media appearance?
I'm sure that'll be on Monday.
Yeah.
When they play.
Well,
that.
once Biden does do the 200 million shots in 100 days, then maybe we will actually hear from Dan Crenshaw. I'll hold my breath until then. Maybe we won't have a co-host anymore.
Wow, that is.
That's kind of dark. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a little bit dark.
Yeah, I don't.
Let's do. This is a. Let's do this ad. This is a new MAGA congressional candidate, and has really raised the threshold for what is going to be a nutso ad in the future. Here it is. This is Dan Rodimer running in Texas's 6th district.
Three dirtiest jobs in the world: professional wrestling, politician, and bull riding. Let's go, boys!
We call that bull Nancy Pelosi. It's the beast.
Now that's Texas tough, baby. 2 out of 3 dirty jobs done. I'm Big Dan Rodimer. Texas has big problems. We need a big fighter to solve those problems. The communists in D.C. are ruining America. We have a big problem. Texas, send Big Dan to Congress. I know how to handle Nancy Pelosi and stop her bull. And I'll put a boot right in her socialist platform. Well, it looks like I already did.
What?
Men and women's bathrooms, boys and girls sports, higher taxes, higher gas prices. They're building a wall around D.C., but they're not protecting our borders. They're laughing at us. Now they're gonna try to take away our guns.
Poop.
Oh, hell no!
I moved my family of 7 back to Texas because I wanted to raise my kids in a constitutional-friendly state. Here in Texas, we are free. We live free. We are a threat to those in power. They hate Texas. They hate our way of life. The communists in D.C. want to shut down our churches, close our businesses, indoctrinating our children, communism in our classrooms, make our daughters unsafe in sports and school, destroy American borders and our American history. We must stop them. Hire me to represent you, and I'll go to D.C. and kick some left-wing ass.
Hire me.
Voters in the Texas 6th Congressional District, vote Big Dan in the special election.
Step and poop again.
I'll fight for you and the Texas way of life. Let's make America Texas again. I'm Dan Rodimer, and I approve this message.
All right, let me just start with this. If you live in Texas, presuming that's where it was shot, and you know anybody who works in production, I will pay a monetary reward for the name of the stunt guy who did the bull riding. Let me tell you something about when you shoot talent or the subject of your ad doing something like that. You know what you shoot? Wide enough to see their face.
Yeah, well.
Let's play the beginning of that ad. I want to play the whole thing again.
Okay. You want to play the whole thing again?
I don't want to.
Oh.
No, just the beginning where he's doing the bull riding. You tell me if you can identify who's riding that bull.
I almost had a heart attack.
And then you watch the crappy job they did with him falling off that bull and his hat coming off.
Okay, well, once we're...
Ready? Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go. No sound, please. No face. No face. Oh, that's weird. It's the bull. Is the bull running for? Oh, wait, that's from behind. He's down the ground. Now watch this. And watch the hat come off. Ready? And oh yeah. All right. That is weird.
Yeah.
That is weird.
And now it's on again.
Yeah, now it's back on again. Well, I mean, he maybe picked...
Continuity.
Yeah. Oh, oops.
Oh, that is a continuity issue.
Well, that is weird.
It's odd. Yeah, I'd love if maybe he could recreate that live.
He didn't ride it.
Yeah, we know.
I don't think he rode that bull.
Okay, so he puts politician in the middle and then says bull riding, presumably so he could start bull riding, right? But, it's just like in terms of how you're going to phrase something, probably not the best since you're running for office. You don't bury the lead in the middle. You do it at the end.
I feel like we cannot go through that whole ad and analyze it.
I have another critique. When he steps in the bullshit and says, oops, looks I already did, he put his butt through Nancy Pelosi's communist socialist ideas, right? All right, cool. Then, like, what's the point?
Right. And now, fortunately, we don't have to send you to Congress now.
Okay, thank you for advertising how you already put your boot through it.
Hold on a second. I just found a video for Vote Big Dan Rodheimer for Nevada's 3rd last year in 2020.
What?
Harpet Big and Dan?
Yeah, that's what he...
Oh my God.
Wrestling thing again. Let's cut the hype. I'm Dan Rodheimer. I'm just a small businessman, a family man, living in the suburbs. But I see what the liberals do to President Trump, and he needs backup. That's why I'm running for Congress. Liberals like Dan Schwartz will keep attacking, but I'm always ready. I'm Dan Rodheimer, and I approve this message.
Wait, what was on his legs?
What, is that his wrestling outfit? Is that the same guy?
I think so.
That is hilarious.
Well, he's been living in Texas now for almost an entire year, and that's completely changed my accent.
I want to see a Big Dan from every state. I want to see Hawaiian Big Dan. I want to see Washington Big Dan, the North and South Dakota Big Dans.
Communist Washington, D.C. hates Hawaii.
Doing a James Gandolfini impression in New Jersey.
Exactly. Those gabagools up in Washington, they hate New Jersey. Oh my God, Big Dan.
Kept all of his old ads on the same YouTube channel from when he was running in Nevada to when he was running in Texas.
Also, Big Dan is such a Jersey nickname too.
I have a feeling Big Dan is actually just trying to be an actor, and I don't know that Big Dan is actually trying to be a congressman.
Well, he should probably start by doing his own stunts.
Full disclosure, I've run in every state in the country. I've been Big Dan in a multitude of locations. Oh boy, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Wait, what? Tucker Carlson they're saying that the Republicans are going to have no choice but to elect a fascist in 10, 15 years. What? Sam, how could you say something like that? What's wrong with you? You out of control? No, I'm not saying that. Tucker Carlson and his guest is saying that. Here is Tucker Carlson welcoming to his program Jesse Kelly.
I think you make a really solid point about the sadness and the powerlessness that people feel in the face of this. And at some point, people are going to say, why should I follow the rules? Why should I be a good citizen if they don't have to follow the rules? I mean, things kind of break down at some point, don't they?
Well, they will break down. They are breaking down, Tucker. I've said this before, and I'm telling you, I'm worried that I'm right. The right is going to pick a fascist within 10 to 20 years because they're not going to be the only ones on the outs. There's 60, 70 million of us. We're not a tiny minority. And if we're going to be all treated like criminals and all subject to every single law while Antifa Black Lives Matter guys go free and Hunter Biden goes free, then the right's going to take drastic measures. And it's not about Hunter Biden and his drug use. Nobody cares the guy was bumping booger sugar lines off European hookers on the weekend. It's about justice that he's never held accountable for, and none of the Bidens are. But you would be, Tucker, and so would I.
That's so well put, and you're absolutely right. We're moving toward actually.
I want a compilation of those from Tucker.
Undermining the system that kept extremism at bay, and I don't think we can say that enough. I'm so glad that you just said it. Jesse Kelly, thank you.
Well, you bet, Tucker.
Booger Dooger.
Sugar.
Listen. The story here is that, like, we're gonna go fascist, and it's gonna be the liberals' fault. Because
we didn't want to become fascists, but you made us.
Hunter Biden's going free. We're all gonna be fascists now.
Can they cool it with the Coke stuff? I mean, it's just like obvious that they're obsessed with the fact that Hunter Biden's like done cocaine and had an issue in the past. But like, I mean, they're kind of overcompensating a little bit when Don Jr. eventually runs, because he's going to have a little bit of some booger sugar issues himself.
The issue is that 20 years from now, when someone runs as a fascist, they're going to be talking about Hunter Biden and Antifa getting away with all of it. I mean, this is just simply their frame. They can just plug anything into this machine. I remember being on a panel with Whitman, former governor of New Jersey. What was her first name? She was the former EPA.
Chrissy Todd.
Yeah, Chrissy Todd Whitman. She was the EPA head under George Bush, and I think it was on a panel with her maybe like, I don't know, back maybe 10 years ago now, 2011 or something. And she said, look, if liberals weren't so adamant about climate change, they wouldn't force conservatives to be to be climate change deniers.
It's just saying we're reactionary in our nature.
We have no agency.
Exactly.
It says we have no agency except for the way that we react to the left, which is largely true, right? A lot of modern conservatism is just about owning the libs. And so they don't really know who they are when they're just engaging in cultural Dr. Seuss nonsense.
Yeah.
Who they are independent of leftist reactions.
It's the "look what you made me do" thing that, you know, like the Taylor Swift song, and it goes back to Nixon as the first Republican I identified this in, because I studied him, but he was doing all this Watergate stuff, and in his mind he was thinking LBJ was doing this shit to me. So, and LBJ actually wasn't. J. Edgar Hoover gassed him up about that to make him paranoid. But yeah, it's always "look what you made me do."
Abuser logic, and it's also again, it's pathetic that they don't have agency outside of how other people treat them, I guess.
Damien, Bree and Virgil talked about NFTs the other day, and I'm just figuring out what those things are. Pretty insane, honestly. As far as art goes, I would say that if art, I didn't follow that. I mean, I know there was some like,
It's Bitcoin, but instead of currency, it's a little art that is also tied to a server somewhere. So you have to hope that server infrastructure stays for the lifetime of your NFT. It's just another speculative, nonsense.
More to
built on crypto.
It is art. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's images. So like, there's actually these basketball cards, which I as a former basketball card collector, I was intrigued by. But yeah, like one sold for like $69 million or something like that. That was like, which just seems like a joke to me. For just some modern art piece that looked like crap. So it's a bubble.
Arizona leftists, Republicans in Arizona, too dug in deep into the right with no possibility to even consider anything democratic. They just lifted the mask mandate. It's sad to see Republicans obsessed with individual freedom over the good of the community. Emma Pewbowner, did you hear about the New York City police reform? Sounds like they're ending qualified immunity, among other things. Yeah, I saw that the New York City council voted against qualified immunity. I wonder in practice how much, I mean, if that is a if that's a state reform or a city reform. I need to look into that, but I did see that. And if it actually in practice means that they don't have qualified immunity in the city, that is great. Sam Seder, de minimis penis. Are you following the debate about the inflation risk from the COVID relief bill? It's maddening how little penetration the MMT perspective is getting in the mainstream press. Can you talk about how we can get deeper penetration, given how small what we have to work with is? Jewish space laser. The U.S. has done a wonderful job of vaccine distribution. Companies are holding the vaccine hostage for profit. These two statements contradict each other. No. Where we are the richest country in the world, we can pay for it. Poorer countries can't. We have spent the money on the production We're not allowing those entities that can produce it, like in Bangladesh or in India, to produce it. Those statements do not contradict each other. It's just that we paid the ransom. Other countries can't. A Square, heartbreaking interviews on immigration situation yesterday. Sam, this is another issue that will compound the Dems' focus and execution. The media chiefs told us years ago the Mad King was good for ratings. There is a clear sense of desperation that the ratings drop to find the next narrative that will bring back eyeballs, but people are exhausted and now more interested in good policy. I hope. One hopes. Science people for patent sharing. The mRNA vaccines don't twist the spike protein conformation for easier access to the cell. The mutations leading to higher ineffectivity do that. The mRNA makes a small portion of the normal spike protein. That's why makes a small portion of the normal spike protein. That's why there were worries that the antibodies generated using wild-type spike protein might not be as good against mutants. But you understand it better than most scientists, so kudos. Thank you. I'm not sure I understood what you said, but I will take it to heart. Mexico, my friend and I are going to get our sex and vaccine dose tomorrow. Can we get a shofar? Also, congrats on hitting 1 million subs. Proud of you. Thank you. Majority Report, wardrobe coordinator. It'd be very difficult for Ben Shapiro to drive conversation because his feet don't reach the pedals. Man, watching that Jimmy Dore clip, I was waiting for the camera to zoom in on Aramate and the curb theme starting to play. The crass rebuttal. Sam, with your newfound fame on the Peacock, you should get on Seth Meyers' show. He sounds more like you with every closer look segment. Also, instead of reading member IMs, maybe they could scroll in another window. That would be a good idea, but that's an in-studio situation where Zoom is difficult. Married to Mothra, more like Sam's Trump with all these vacations. Oh, more like Sam Trump with all these vacations. I go by the DOE, folks.
And that's anti-Semitic.
Wyoming, it's Passover. Wyoming Ryan, Sam got his first shot, then bounces for a week. Coincidence? I think not. Enjoy your vacation, Sam. Thank you. Country Fury Roads, WAPO reporting Gail Manchin, Joe Manchin's wife, appointed to the Appalachian Regional Commission by Biden. Despite the nepotism, good sign Manchin is horse trading with Biden to make room for something that benefits people not named Manchin. One can only hope. Bullprog, don't forget the door. Yeah, we did. Matty Moron, can't believe you guys have Allen Iverson on. Huge get. Sam was born to be a party bureaucrat overseeing the administration of a utility grid. I think I might appreciate that. Mailman Paul, wait, this is fake Carl Beijer? The real one looks like Allen Iverson.
Well, we had Epic Carl. He was in his Epic Carl form.
Cuomo Snipperling, I can totally see a world wherein workers own the means of production, but I am not sure we could realistically replace the markets with, i.e. the economic calculation problem. Comrade DeCat, not all socialists want state control like our anarchist comrades, indeed. Sean from NorCal, I'm willing to stand next to a pallet full of bottled water and Snickers bars to hand out with voters before they get in line. Who's with me? I think there's going to be a lot of work around that. But again, I think that may be a little bit of a red herring. I think the control over the elections by the Republicans is the big thing.
Yes, that's bigger than the water.
Mike from Baltimore, but also egregious. Mike from Baltimore, we're talking about the private ownership of the means of production. That's what we mean by ending private property, not your coffee mug. Right, okay, I think that's what my understanding of it was too. Emma's Posit Fund. Hello, Sam. Emma, MR Crew. Today marks my wife's and second week waiting for receiving the Moderna vaccine. I feel a sense of relief having an extra layer of protection. Still using the mask because it's the responsible thing to do. Lastly, when will the Minority Sports Report with Emma start? It's the NCAA tourney coverage. Go Trojans. Left is best.
I said, I have mixed. I try to honestly stay away from college sports. You should listen to my interview with Dave Zirin about the exploitative nature of college sports. And also, I just like.
Did you do that in Ring of Fire?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was really, just the fact there was a unionization effort done by Northwestern athletes. And yeah, sorry.
We're going to have him on the show. No, go ahead.
No, he's great. And there's a lot more to it than even if you're not a sports fan. Please listen to it because I was very passionate about that interview.
All right, I got 3 more minutes. Sam, you old bloober chup, you. Garden Socialist. Sorry if I missed someone saying this already, but there are a lot of us socialists who don't want things nationalized. Doesn't mean we don't want private property or free markets, just that we don't trust the hierarchy of the U.S. government much more than we do the capitalists. That being said, I'm happy to be getting my U.S. government capitalist developed vaccine today. Any chance I can get a shofar? All right. Forever Postal pool salesman. Check out the story out of Delaware County. The town council is trying to extort a Democratic councilman after stalking him online and reporting him to child services based on allegations of being a swinger and smoking weed. Oy. Discount code majority on your Forever pool. Eric from Iowa. Just a heads up, the AP is reporting Mike Pompeo was in Iowa today, feeling out his 2024 campaign.
God.
Not a surprise. Barrett at home, too. I don't remember the last guest that you had on that I didn't care for, but this socialist guy I'll remember.
All right.
I'm not sure I follow that. Uni P. Sam, what's your first impression of Dave Rubin? Brother, honest, please. What was your first impression of Dave Rubin? I don't even remember it. Just dunce.
Neither do I.
Bad Takes Pod. Emma, you have checked back in with Rahman Mohammed, the deputy mayor of employment in Newark, became a big Bloomberg supporter in the primaries. Fitting, because laughing in the face of struggling communities would have been a part of Bloomberg's administration.
I really appreciate you guys watching that piece. That was from my time at TYT, and I was covering the Newark water crisis. That elected official, I'm blanking on his exact title, but he started laughing in the faces of water protesters. So very corrupt system in many ways there.
Jeremy, I think the thing about Kristen Sinema is that she's right-wing. She uses the cloak of left-wing woke culture to pass as a progressive, whatever that word means. Doesn't seem to be working. Mr. Bunman, almost anyone can join the IWW, but Sam might easily fall into one of the big exceptions as a boss with unilateral hiring-firing power. Dolink, keep telling you to watch Michael Moore's Where Next to Invade about social democracy success. That's not socialism, though, is it? Father Homunculus. Emma, do you have any info on the situation with Panarin concerning his time off? Panarin from the Rangers?
Panarin, like Panera Bread. What do you mean about
concerning his time off allegations from Russia?
Well, those allegations were basically proven false and were like the guy who made them. It was openly in retaliation for him being one of the only Russian athletes to speak out against Putin. Like, for example, Alexander Ovechkin, Putin officiated his wedding. There's a coziness there, and Panarin was very brave in my view. I'm glad that he's on the Rangers.
Two more. Jordan Peterson's TikTok. Are we ever going to see a DOJ investigation of the extrajudicial killing of Michael Reinhold? I would sure like to see more light shed on his murder. There, something went down there. That is weird. That's the one that Trump said, I sent the sheriffs in there and took him out. And it looked like he did. And the final I am of the week. Missed the first part of the show. Did you mention the Georgia House member who was arrested for knocking on the door when Kemp was signing the bill charged with felonies? We didn't. We'll have to play that on Monday. All right, folks. You'll have to play that on Monday. I will see you in a week. Emma will see you on Monday. Emma, Matt, Brendan, good job. Have a good weekend.
I take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth